Good afternoon, students. Today is Sunday, 31 January 2021. Sorry it took so long to get this second video up for the week. It's been a busy week for me. I had 3 meetings and I had to finish up reviewing and revising a very long manuscript for the publisher. So this completes the two lectures for the previous week, and we have 2 more lectures coming up this week. I'm thinking probably Wednesday and Friday for your 2 lectures. Okay, let me make a few comments before we get back to our topic for today. We're finishing up Sarah Conley's essay today. This is the 3rd day, and that means we're going to get started on the 2nd essay next time I see you on the video. So please read before you watch the next video. Please read the essay by Carl Cohen. It's on biomedical research on animals. We're going to spend both days next week on Cohen. So make sure you've read it slowly and carefully prior to the first of the 2 videos that you watch. Tomorrow I will post the 3rd reading of the course. It's by a couple, 2 people, both named Emmanuel. And I'll post that for you tomorrow. So if you want to get started on the 3rd reading, you may do so. The first exam will cover just those 3 readings: Conley, Cohen, and the essay by the Emmanuels. I have posted 3 items for you in the past few days. You may have noticed. I posted a short essay, just a couple of pages long, by Jonathan Gruber, and I'll mention that in a few minutes during my lecture. I posted a New York Times op-ed column by Sarah Conley, and I posted a New York Times column by the food critic of the New York Times for many years, Craig Claiborne. Our exam, the first exam, is 18 days from now. It's on the 18th of February. Make sure you get that on your calendar. I'll tell you more about it as the days get closer, as the exam gets closer. 1 week before the exam, I will post sample examination questions for you on Canvas. So, okay, let's get started. Now, we were discussing some types of regulation. Conley believes that people make bad decisions and that adversely affects their health. If people themselves bore the full costs of their bad decisions, Conley might be inclined to let them absorb those costs. But much of what we do has bad effects on others, and Conley is concerned about that. We have no right, through bad decision making, to impose costs on others. People who make bad lifestyle choices tend to have bad health. They seek out medical treatment for their bad health. Often they can't pay for it, and when they can't pay for it, other members of society have to. So we've already discussed education, which is the provision of information to people. The problem with that, according to Conley, is it does not seem to work very well. Providing information to people is one thing, but motivating them to act on that information is something altogether different and not as easy. So let's talk about the second possibility, and that is advertising. Government has in the past banned certain types of advertising, and it can do so again. Tobacco advertising was banned back in 1971, 50 years ago. It's been banned from radio and television, I should say. I think you can still see tobacco ads in magazines and perhaps newspapers. Advertising is powerful, as you know. If it weren't powerful, you wouldn't see so much of it. It does work. It works largely by association. So what the company selling the product will try to do is associate its product with something that you are already presumed to want or like or enjoy. So when you look at a typical beer commercial, for example, Budweiser, Busch, Heineken, the beer is being drunk by typically young people who are in good shape. They are doing something pleasant or enjoyable, dancing, for example. Maybe they're on a beach with a beautiful moon overhead. Someone is playing a guitar or playing music. People are shown holding the beverage. The idea is to get the viewer to associate the good times that are being had with the beverage. So the next time you're in the store, you spontaneously reach for that product that you saw in the ad. That means the ad has worked on you. Right? The product has been successfully associated with something you like or that you want. Now, so advertising is powerful, and if you're trying to discourage people from doing something, you might want to consider banning or prohibiting advertising for that product. I think here of an ad that I saw recently, which I'm sure Conley would not approve of. It was maybe in the past couple of years I saw it, and maybe it's still running. Taco Bell was running ads with the term fourth meal in them. Fourth meal. And the idea, I guess, is that you get up in the morning, you eat breakfast. Later in the morning, close to noon, you eat lunch. In the evening, you eat dinner. And then in the evening, when you're out with your friends, you stop in at Taco Bell and get your fourth meal of the day. It was called fourth meal, just one word. The two words were squeezed together. Now, you could say that that is obscene. Taco Bell is encouraging people to eat a fourth meal on at least some days, if not every day. So that's the opposite of what Conley wants. She wants limitations on what can be advertised, not more advertising to encourage people to eat too much or drink too much. Okay, the next item on our list has to do with subsidies. You probably know that our government subsidizes certain industries, including agriculture. There are price supports, which is what they're called, price supports for tobacco, sugar or sugarcane, corn, wheat, and many other agricultural products. Soybeans, I'm sure the dairy industry gets a healthy subsidy every year. Pork, the pork industry, poultry, beef, and so on. So the idea is the government is trying to encourage production by telling the producers not to worry, that they will get a certain guaranteed price for their products, and it won't be subject to the various fluctuations of the market. Now, that can be changed, right? If we're subsidizing sugar producers, which I believe we are, that can stop. Now, you may want to give them notice. The government can tell sugar producers that in 5 years, their subsidy will be cut in half, or maybe it will end altogether. You need to give them a certain amount of time to adjust to the going away of the subsidy. But that is something that government can do. Stop subsidizing products that contribute to obesity and therefore to increasing healthcare costs. Another item, this will be familiar to you, another strategy of government is to tax certain products or certain activities. These are sometimes called sin taxes, S-I-N, sin. So there are currently taxes on alcohol. So when people buy a drink or of any kind, alcoholic beverage, there's a certain portion of that fee that they pay that goes to government, either the federal government or state government or local government or some combination of them. And it's called a sin tax. I guess the idea is that these activities are sinful in that they contribute to various problems for the individual and for society. So government doesn't ban the consumption of alcohol. What it does is make it more costly by imposing taxes on it. Another product that's taxed is tobacco products. I think the percentage of a price of cigarettes, a pack of cigarettes, that goes to taxes is now quite high, and that's because many people are going to keep smoking no matter how much it costs for the cigarettes. The price is said to be inelastic. A price is said to be elastic when people will buy. How much of that product people buy depends on the price. So if the price goes high enough, people will simply stop buying it. That's called an elastic price. Some prices are inelastic, which means no matter how high the price goes, people will continue to buy them. And I think the price of tobacco, cigarettes in particular, is highly inelastic. And government can take advantage of that. Government can continue taxing tobacco products at a very high rate, knowing that most people will continue to purchase them, and therefore revenues for the government will continue to stay high. Gambling is another so-called sin that is taxed. If you go out to Las Vegas, there are taxes on just about everything you buy and do. And I assume that some of the money that is earned by the casinos goes to pay taxes for the city of Las Vegas, the state of Nevada, perhaps even the federal government. So, what am I leading up to? Perhaps government should tax products such as sodas. Sodas are high in calories. People consume them at a very high rate. Perhaps there should be a soda tax or a sugar tax on these products. And the proceeds can be designated for health care. Right? So if people want to continue consuming these products, they're going to have to pay a little extra for taxes. The money collected as taxes will be used to fund health care programs. So the people who are imposing the costs on society are the very people who will be made to pay them or absorb them. Now here's where I want to mention that short essay by Jonathan Gruber. He actually proposes not just a tax on sugary drinks or on sugar, but he actually suggests, I don't know how serious he is, but he suggests that there be a tax, get this, on body weight. Right? Near the end of his essay, he says that the government should consider taxing people who are obese as a way of discouraging them from making bad dietary decisions. Now, I don't know how that would be implemented. I can see lots of practical problems. People would say that it's fat shaming. I don't know, but Gruber did propose that. He's an economist. Now, in general, there's an old saying, if you want more of something, subsidize it. If you want less, tax it. So the idea here is tax the items or the activities that are contributing to rising healthcare costs. And I think many people are looking in particular at sugar. Right? All products that make use of sugar should have a tax on them, according to this way of thinking. And since there's so many sugary products sold, the amount of revenue taken in will be quite large, and that will help fund healthcare around the country. Now, Conley does mention one other item. She suggests banning certain activities. She says there are already many dangerous substances that are banned. You simply can't sell certain products like trans fats. So maybe we should consider banning sugar or sugary drinks. Let's read a little bit of what she says on page 315. Just a couple of sentences. Near the bottom of page 315, Conley says, if banning soda turns out to be a cheap and efficient way to avoid obesity and all the illnesses it causes, why would that not be a reasonable measure? So she's talking about banning soda, not sugar, but soda which is made from sugar. Soda is not addictive in the way that cigarettes are. But without being addictive, it clearly is sufficiently attractive that too many people drink too much of it. There's no reason to ban it, I think, until other methods have been tried. But there's no principled reason that banning should be off the table. So her verdict on banning soda or soft drinks is that it's still on the table. It should be a last resort. We shouldn't ban sodas until we've tried everything else and found that those other things aren't working. And maybe then we'll try banning soda. Now it makes you wonder, many sodas, including some I drink, are calorie-free. They are, evidently they're made with artificial sugars. And so if you look at the can or bottle, it says 0 calories, 0. So I assume that if the problem is obesity, I assume that Conley would allow low-calorie or no-calorie drinks to be sold with artificial sweeteners. I think she's talking about banning only those sodas that actually have calories in them. Okay, there's another item I'd like to add to the list, arm twisting. This has been tried in New York, in New York City. The city of New York has met with restaurant associations and restaurant owners and tried to twist their arms into limiting the amount of salt that they put on their foods that they sell. And also take the salt and pepper shakers off the tables. Make people ask for salt and pepper. And if you sit down and you want some salt on your meal, you can ask, and I assume that the server will bring it to you. But some people perhaps won't ask. They just won't put any salt on their food and they'll eat it anyway. And so the hope is, if you notice, it's a kind of manipulation, isn't it? By taking the salt shakers off the tables in the restaurants, overall consumption of sodium will decrease. And sodium is, of course, linked with hypertension and other disorders. So, and those shorten our lives. They impose greater costs on the healthcare system and so on. So notice, the city of New York is not banning salt or coercing restaurant owners into limiting salt. It's trying to cajole them or twist their arms to induce them in some way to limit the amount of salt that they put in their meals and on the table. Okay, so those are some of the things that can be tried to improve people's healthcare decision-making and their lifestyles. Conley then points out that there's something odd about this. She's been talking about a right to health care throughout the first half of her article, and she claims that there is a right to health care, or at least she assumes that for the purposes of this paper. Why are we now talking about authorities limiting our choices? Now, how did we go from there's a right to health care to authorities may intervene and either coerce you or manipulate you or try to persuade you through informational campaigns? Conley says on page 315, generally, the more rights we have, the more freedoms we have, not more requirements for action. So there's something odd here. Right? The paper went from talking about a right to health care to talking about government doing things to limit our choices. But it's really easily, the puzzle is easily resolved, because on page 316, Conley points out that the recipients of health care, in claiming their right, also place themselves under some obligations. So she's saying, with rights come duties. Now, duties is just another word for obligations, of course. So when you are given a right to health care, with that right comes responsibility, obligation, and duty, right? It's only fair that your right be correlated with an obligation or a responsibility. And government is simply enforcing that obligation against you by intervening in your decision making to get you to make better choices. Think of it as quid pro quo. Government says everyone has a right to health care, not an absolute right, remember our discussion, but a conditional, limited right. In return, you have to promise to make better decisions. And if you don't keep your promise, government will step in and do various things to protect you from yourself. It's a paternalistic approach that Conley is advocating. Government is intervening in our lives to get us to make better decisions for ourselves, our families, and of course, society as a whole. To the extent that government is limiting our choices for our own good, it's acting paternalistically. It's acting as though it were our parent, right? Pater means father in Latin. So paternalism, the word paternalism means acting like a father. And Conley is advocating that government act in that way, like a father or a mother. Maybe the term should be parentalism instead of paternalism. So on page 316, once again, Conley says, one may say that my right to claim care from others also creates an obligation for me to contribute what I can to my own health care. Okay, so you have a responsibility that goes along with your right to health care. All right, in the next few minutes, and this lecture, by the way, won't take a full hour, probably closer to 40 or 45 minutes, because we didn't leave ourselves a lot to cover in this essay. But here are some objections that might be raised to Conley's argument. The first objection that a critic might raise is that Conley is too harsh. She's too hard on people. Right? She's too stern, maybe too mean. Why not just leave these decisions to people to make voluntarily? Why is Conley so eager to get government involved in our lives to either force us, coerce us, manipulate us, or persuade us to make better decisions? Here's how she puts the objection on pages 316, 317. People should simply take it upon themselves voluntarily to pursue a healthy life by giving up smoking, avoiding obesity, eating 5 helpings of fruit and vegetables a day, sticking to whole grains, limiting alcohol intake, and engaging in at least moderate exercise. That's what the critic is saying. Right? Conley is putting words into the mouth of her critic. Right? Why are you insisting that government get involved? Why not just leave it to people to make better decisions? And Conley's reply is, as you probably can guess, and I'll state it from page 317, it ignores too many realities of human psychology. It just won't work. Right? People will not make better decisions, even when government provides people with useful information. As I said the other day, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can give people all the information that you think they need to make good decisions. You can't make them make good decisions. People can ignore the information or misunderstand it. What are some of the problems that keep people from making better decisions? One of them is called weakness of the will. We're weak beings. Human beings are weak by nature. We are strong by nature as well. We have the capacity to make good decisions, to withstand temptations, but many of us are weak. We have a bag of M&Ms on the counter, and in the evening we're watching television and we're glancing up at those M&Ms, and before you know it, we have the M&Ms and we're eating them. Right? Maybe you'll regret it later. Say, why did I eat so many M&Ms? Okay, that was not good for me. And as you may have guessed, that's exactly what happened to me yesterday. I was watching television. I'd probably eaten all my calories for the day. I decided I'd have a few M&Ms, so I did. Probably too many. Okay, it's weakness. It's just a normal fact of human beings. People are weak-willed. There are diets, as you know. I don't know what the percentage is, but I suspect that at least half of people who go on a diet fail. They may keep the diet up for a few days or even weeks, but eventually they revert to their old habits, right? And the diet disappears from their lives. That's weakness, right? It takes a lot of willpower, determination, and discipline to stick to a diet, to say no to yourself when you're hungry or when you'd like that extra cookie or whatever, or this another piece of pizza. So Conley is well aware that human beings are weak, and that's why they can't do it on their own or find it difficult to do it on their own. Another problem is human beings have what Conley calls cognitive biases. They're biased in certain ways, mentally, right? We make mistakes when we think, when we reason. One problem is optimism. People are unduly optimistic. People, especially young people who take up smoking or chewing tobacco, think that they themselves will not contract cancer later in their lives. Oh, that's something, other people get cancer, I won't get it. When the statistics show that by smoking or chewing tobacco, they've increased their odds of getting cancer significantly, the probability of getting cancer. So optimistic people always think things will work out well for me. I won't get that disease. I won't experience the problems with obesity that other people do. We also misframe questions, right? We misunderstand statistics and things like that. Also, people engage in wishful thinking. We think that the future will conform to our wishes, when in fact there's no relationship whatsoever between what you wish to be the case and what is the case. So it's a natural confusion. It's called wishful thinking. And there are other cognitive biases as well. So people try to quit smoking, they find themselves unable to do so. People try to cut back on the amount of alcohol or soft drinks that they consume for dietary reasons, and they backslide, and they end up in a short period of time drinking just as much as they once did. People eat to excess. They know they shouldn't, but they do. So it's a combination of weakness, wishful thinking, and other cognitive mistakes that people make. All right? So Conley thinks that government has an important role to play to nudge us into making better decisions. Nudging. It's the title of a book by two law professors called Nudge. And they agree with Conley that government should do things to help us make better decisions. Not necessarily by forcing us or even by coercing us, but by manipulating us. One way to do this is to try to decrease the size of food portions. Think about it. Many people, when they sit down in a restaurant and the entree is brought to them, they have this idea they have to eat that whole entree, because many of us were raised to think that waste is a bad thing. You shouldn't waste food. Right? I grew up hearing that there are people starving in other parts of the world, and I should be grateful for the food I have. And if I waste it, then I'm disrespecting the people who don't have any food. Now, I'm not sure I understand the logic of that, but it did put the idea in my head, which I still have. You shouldn't waste food, right? Especially when people are going without food in other places. So if the entree is brought to you in the restaurant, people who don't want to waste food will eat it all, even if they know they shouldn't eat that much. So what would happen if the restaurant decreased the size of its entrees? Maybe 20% decrease. Probably many people would eat the whole entree. They would be full. They would feel sated, right? Like their stomach is full. And they would end up with 20% fewer calories just because the size of the portion was smaller. I've heard that people from other countries, when they come to the U.S., remark about how large the portions are in this country. In other countries, you get much smaller entrees in restaurants. So maybe it's an American thing. Americans love their food, maybe feel entitled to eat their fill, and they want big portions. But that's something that can easily be changed. Restaurants can be encouraged by government to decrease portion sizes. And not just restaurants, but what about frozen meals? A frozen Stouffer's meal, for example. Right? Some of them are huge. I've seen some that are as big as a laptop computer. Now, if a whole family were to eat that, that's okay, probably. If it were to be divided up among 3 or 4 people. But what if one person eats the whole thing, or 2 people, a couple? That's probably too many calories. And maybe they eat it because they don't want to eat it again the next day and they don't want to throw it away. Maybe they don't have any dogs to eat it. And it's probably not good for dogs to eat human food anyway. Many dogs suffer from obesity just like humans. So portion sizes is something that government is looking at to discourage manufacturers of food products and restaurants from offering such large portions to people. And this is related to soft drinks. The city of New York a few years ago mandated that soft drinks of a certain size, it prohibited the sale of soft drinks in containers above, I don't know what it was, maybe 32 ounces or 16 ounces. So I think some people like to go into a convenience store and get a humongous soft drink, maybe 32 ounces, which is a quart, or even larger. And they take that soft drink and carry it around and sip it throughout the day. That's a lot of calories. The city of New York thought that if they limited the sale of soft drinks to 16-ounce containers, people would probably limit their intake of sugar. Now, the law did not prohibit you from buying 2 16-ounce containers. So if you still want your 32 ounces of Coke or Dr. Pepper, you can buy 2 16-ounce containers and drink one after the other. But most people would find that inconvenient. Right? You'd need 2 hands to carry them around with you, whereas one big container you could still get in one hand. So I think the city of New York was manipulating people. It was trying to decrease people's consumption of sugar by making it inconvenient to buy too many ounces of these soft drinks. Now you could say that's devious, if that's your point of view, or it's ingenious, depending on your viewpoint. I think Conley would say it's ingenious, right? Government has a role to play in nudging people into making better decisions by discouraging producers and restaurants from selling portions that are too big, and convenience stores from selling soft drinks in too big of a container. Okay, so that's the first objection to Conley. She's too harsh on people. Why not let them make decisions voluntarily? Her answer is there's plenty of evidence that people will not make good decisions if left to their own devices. Here's the second objection. It's, believe it or not, that Conley is too lenient. The first objection is that Conley is too harsh. The second objection is that Conley is too lenient. She's too easy on people, right? Some people, she says, appear to make a strenuous effort to live unhealthily. That's page 317. It's perverse. There are people who not only smoke, but brag about it. They enjoy it, and they let everyone know they enjoy it. There's a musician you may have heard of named Joe Jackson. He's one of my favorite artists. I have several of his albums on compact disc. I love his music. But he's British, by the way. but he plays concerts all over the world. He loves smoking. And he has actually written an op-ed column in the New York Times saying, I will never come back and play a concert in New York City again, because New York City evidently prohibits smoking in concert arenas, even backstage, where he, as the artist, would be. And he wrote in his article, he said, I love smoking. I'm well aware of the risks. I'm an adult. I choose to smoke. And I want to smoke when I'm at work. When I'm doing a concert, I want to be able to have a cigarette. When I'm backstage in my room before or after the concert, I want to have a cigarette. But I can't anymore because the city of New York prohibits it. So all I can do is say, I'm not coming to New York to play my music anymore. So it was really interesting. Maybe I'll post that op-ed column for you. I have it in PDF format. I'll try to remember to post it for you today or tomorrow. It's very interesting. Now, what would Conley say about this? She would say, Joe Jackson is, he's making a bad decision in smoking, and not only in smoking, but publicizing his love of smoking. That may give his fans, some of his young fans, the idea that smoking is a good thing, and they may take up the habit, and that may be harmful to them. Another example of this is Craig Claiborne. Craig Claiborne was the food critic of the New York Times for many years, many decades, I think, and he wrote a column back in 1976, which I have now posted for you on Canvas. You should read it. Claiborne, the column is entitled, In Defense of Eating Rich Foods. He says, well, let me quote Craig Claiborne because he says it better than I could. This is near the end of the column that I posted for you. He says, I love hamburgers and chili con carne and hot dogs, and foie gras, that's goose liver, and sauterne, and those small birds known as ortolans. I like the wines of Spain and Italy and of California and the Rhine Valley, as well as I do Burgundies and Bordeaux. I love barquette of quail eggs with hollandaise sauce and clam bakes with lobsters dipped in so much butter it dribbles down the chin. I like cheesecake and crepes filled with cream sauces and strawberries with creme fraiche. I think that may be a typo. And I try to love the people who deplore these enthusiasms. I do not sit, there's a type, this version is filled with typos, the one I'm reading from, sorry. I do not sit at table, my mind poisoned with anxieties about foods I'm about to put in my mouth, be it cream sauces or clear consommes. I approach a meal with the blissful knowledge that I will not overeat and will therefore enjoy the blessings that the good Lord has seen fit to provide my table with. And if I'm abbreviating my stay on this earth for an hour or so, I say only that I have no desire to be a Methuselah, 100 or more years old and still alive, grace be to something that plugs into an electric outlet. So that's interesting. Here is Craig Claiborne, who obviously has a love affair with food, who's saying, I understand the risks. I'm a big boy. I'm an adult. I know that eating all these fattening foods may shorten my life, but it's a choice I get to make. I opt for quality of life, even if it comes at the expense of quantity of life. Right? I'd rather live 70 years of high quality life than 75 of a lower quality life, right? I'll give up 5 years or whatever it may be because I want to live. I want to enjoy this bountiful supply of food that we have available to us. By the way, in case you're wondering, I looked it up. I was myself curious. How long did Claiborne live? What kind of life did he have? Was he obese? And here's what I found. Claiborne, who's dead now, lived to be 79. So if his life was shortened, maybe had he eaten a different diet, he would have lived 83 years or 85, I don't know. But he did live quite a long time, 79 years. He was 56 years old when that essay was published. So after he wrote that essay celebrating fatty foods, he lived 23 more years. He appears from photographs that I have seen not to have been obese. So if you're picturing a rotund man pigging out, eating until he drops, that seems not to have been the case. In fact, 1 week after this article was published in the New York Times, he wrote a follow-up column entitled In Defense of Rich Food. The first one was entitled In Defense of Eating Rich Food. The second was entitled In Defense of Rich Food. And he, in that essay, sung the praises of moderation. He said, it's okay to eat all these fatty foods, these rich foods. Just don't eat so much of them, he says. Just sample them. He says in his whole career as a restaurant critic, whenever he went to a restaurant to write a review, he consumed small amounts of a lot of different things that they brought to him. They knew he was the restaurant critic, and obviously they wanted him to write a good review of that restaurant. So they prepared samples of all kinds of foods to him and brought them to his table. Obviously, he couldn't eat a lot of each of these many items, so he maybe took a bite or two of each of them, and it didn't add up to all that many calories. So he says, in that second essay, he summarizes it by saying, eat well, but eat less, right? You can eat high quality, rich, fatty foods, just don't eat so much of them. And I think he lived by that credo. So let's go back to the objection. The objection is that Conley is too lenient on people. People like Joe Jackson, the smoker, and Craig Claiborne, the eater, they appear to be making bad choices, well aware that they're bad choices. Why should they receive any public funding for their health care? If Joe Jackson contracts cancer, that's his problem. He knew full well he was risking cancer when he smoked. If Craig Claiborne becomes obese and becomes diabetic and needs health care, then he should have to bear the cost and not other people. So that's the objection. Conley needs to say to certain people, no, you have no right to health care because you abused the right, you shirked your responsibility, and you are no longer entitled to health care at public expense. What does Conley say to that in response to that objection? She, as you might have expected, says society should still fund health care, even for the Joe Jacksons and the Craig Claibornes of the world. On page 317, she writes, we, as a society, might still choose to offer free treatment out of a general sense that we should help people who are in need, whatever the cause of that need. So she seems to be saying that we should not cut people off from health care, even if we know that that their health problems were brought on by their own bad decisions. So everyone has the same right to health care, even if they're responsible for their bad health. That seems to be her view. Okay, and one final point, another criticism of Conley is that her proposal of greater governmental intervention in our lives would take over too much of our lives. Those are her words, page 319. She's putting words into the mouth of her critic. The critic is saying such laws as she is advocating would take over too much of our lives. And that would be objectionable if that were to occur, at least according to the critic. Conley's response is not necessarily. It would not be mandatory for people to run marathons. She's not advocating anything like that. She's not advocating any any government forcing people to exercise. She's not telling people that they must eat only unsweetened granola, leafy green vegetables, and tofu. Okay? She's not telling people you have to eat a vegetarian or vegan diet. You have to cut out rich foods from your diet. She's not advocating that. She's advocating lifestyle changes that will result in better health on average for people. And that will, she thinks, cut down on healthcare expenditures, leaving more resources for other things we want, such as education, national defense, roads, bridges, libraries, universities, and so on. So I hope you've enjoyed that article by Sarah Connolly. It's certainly food for thought, no pun intended. It's food for thought, isn't it? Right? You're young. You are just getting started on your life's journey. You have a lot of decisions left ahead of you. Decisions about whether to exercise, and if so, how, and to what extent. You have decisions about diet, about how you're going to live your life, what kind of care you will take with your body, and so on. So Conley is urging you to make good decisions, or at least better decisions than you might otherwise make. So I chose this article because it's about an important topic, healthcare, whether there's a right to healthcare, and if so, what it should cover, and also responsibilities for our own health. For Conley, those two things go hand in hand. The right to healthcare and responsibilities for your health go hand in hand. We shouldn't talk about one of them without talking about the other at the same time. Okay, so we're done with Conley. About a third of the questions on the first exam will be drawn from Conley, either from the reading itself, or from my lecture on the reading, or from handouts that I've posted on Conley. Make sure in the next day or so you read, let's say, at least half of Cohen before the first lecture I give, and then complete Cohen before my second lecture. And again, I'll try to get those two lectures up earlier for you this week, probably on Wednesday and Friday. And the reason is I plan to put up my lectures for my other classes on Tuesday and Thursday. And I like to do just one lecture per day. I think it helps me in various ways to spread it out. Okay? So have a great day and the rest of the weekend. And I'll see you back on the video screen in a couple of days, probably Wednesday.